Hello all, my name is Emily Carlin. I'm class of 2016 from St. Michael's, and I currently work in the alumni office as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement, and I'm actually based in Boston for the college. We are also grateful for our wonderful alumni and for Laura Scott to be here tonight. And I will pass it off to Laura, the Director of MOVE, to get us underway.
Thanks, Emily. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Scott, and I may be the only non-alum here tonight, but I feel very close to St. Michael's College and hold the institution and MOVE certainly in my heart and very close to my heart. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. Let me shift things a little bit here. There we go. I'm really excited to be here tonight. And I hope you are too. I have a really cool honor of being able to facilitate this and be part of this conversation tonight. I'm going to give a small disclaimer that I have 2 small children and one is just walking in the room right now. So I'm going to do my best. There she is. Not happy with me right now. But you know, that's what happens. And it's actually beautiful in MOVE because my kids before COVID were often in the office with me, which is lovely. Usually not crying. So let me get back on track. It's a great opportunity for me to be able to facilitate this panel tonight. I really appreciate Alumni Engagement asking me. We have quite a variety of organizations represented tonight by the 4 panelists who agreed to be here, and I'm really excited for you all to meet them. I'm trying to decide if well, you know what, I'm actually going to shift to you all directly in just a second and ask you to introduce yourselves. I don't want to mess up a name, but I also want you to be able to give all the information that you feel is important about you to the group who's here tonight. So before we get there, I have to say that a really, really fun part of my job in MOVE is hearing pretty regularly actually from alums for all kinds of reasons. But one really obvious and incredible common thread is this deep connection to the community that SMC alums maintain far after they have left their time on campus. It really over and over has made me smile. And every time someone calls or emails, I think this is incredible. So I really appreciate you all for the work that you do in the community, the 4 of you. And I'm really excited to be here tonight to hear from you and to share with you how you keep that connection alive for yourself. So I'm going to ask you each to give a short introduction of yourself, name, class year, major, and where you currently live and work, if you would be willing to do so. And let's see, maybe I'll look to Joanne first. Would you be willing to go first?
Yes, I'd be happy to go first. Joanne Nelson, class of 1984. And just because I love St. Mike so much, I got a couple other degrees too in the 2000s. I got an MED and a master's in theology. I work at Mercy Connections, and I have been there a little over 3 years, and after 25 years in higher education. So yeah, I'll kick it off there, if that's okay.
That's great. Thank you so much. Oh, I think I'm muted.
Welcome.
Not muted. Let's see. Peter, it's really nice to see you again. We connected a few months ago. I'd love to hear what's going on for you.
Not much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to connect with everyone. So again, my name is Peter DeFalco. I graduated in 2008. Seems like quite a long time ago. And I live in just south of Boston. I lived in the North End for the last 10 years and then just moved south of Boston once kind of the pandemic hit. Got a little bit more space, so I'm living in Milton, Massachusetts now. Do a lot of traveling for work, but obviously, you know, nothing too recently. So I was a business administration and an economics major at St. Mike's when I graduated in 2008. I currently work in the financial market data space, so at a company called Refinitiv. It was a spin out of the legacy Thomson Reuters company. So we're actually getting purchased by the London Stock Exchange next month. So work in kind of the financial market data industry and support a lot of hedge funds in the finance industry. So happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Peter. And let's see, Mike, I have not met you in person before, I don't think, but I'm really excited to hear your story.
Yeah, well, it's great to meet you and everybody else joining us. Mike DiCristofaro, I was class of 2012, and currently I live in southern New Hampshire in Merrimack, which is sort of right between Nashua and Manchester. And I work for the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, which is a grant-making foundation here in New Hampshire. So really great to be with you all and look forward to sharing some more.
Thanks, Mike. And Rachel, similarly, I don't know that we've met before, but this is an exciting moment to cross paths.
Yeah, similarly, thank you for having me. As Lar mentioned, my name is Rachel Sparks, and I graduated with a degree in psychology in 2011. And I've lived a lot of places since then, but currently I live in Philadelphia and have been working at a national nonprofit called Back on My Feet since 2015. And Back on My Feet uses running or jogging or walking, it doesn't matter what speed you're at, uses running as a catalyst for people who are transitioning out of homelessness to find sustainable employment and community support.
Wow, thank you. So when Emily and Jacob asked me to do this, they offered some questions. So if those of you who were watching, we have a few to start with, and then we are very open and excited to hear what questions you have. And when they sent these questions to me first, I thought, it really made me think about my own journey. And I know my path finding my way to move went in a lot of different directions, none of them sort of originally planned for. But I made my way here through this curious path, and I'm really grateful for all of the steps along the way. And I would be curious to hear from you all, if you can tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get involved in your organization? How did you find your way to the place you are now? And if you can think about this, we'll come back to it if you don't get to it. And if students or if people, I'm thinking of students all the time, if people who are watching this are interested in getting involved in your organization, are there openings or are there positions that are available that you know of, or where might they go to get that information? So how did you find your way to where you are, and how might someone else get connected to your organization if they wanted to? Who would like to go first?
I can kick it off if you want.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. So I am involved with the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Eastern Massachusetts organization. And I have been involved for probably the last 12 or so years. So it's interesting, right? I know that St. Mike's, when I was there, they had a relationship with I believe the Vermont organization of the Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I would always see a lot of my friends and people on campus always have their littles, in the cafeteria, and always kind of hanging around the campus and doing fun activities. So I always said, hey, that would be, something cool that I would like to be involved in. I was really busy and played some sports as well. So I really didn't have the time, but it was always something that, piqued my interest. I didn't know a lot about it, but I think that, I'm a big believer in mentoring in that type of organization. So once I graduated, to the Boston area and had a little bit more time, so definitely kind of reached out and reached out to the Eastern Massachusetts, it was called Massachusetts Bay organization, and asked how I could kind of get involved. And that was kind of my journey there, and became basically a big brother to someone that lived in the South End back in 2009. So right, a year after I graduated in 2008, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had. Got to spend time with him the last 10 years, seen him grow up. And the organization is definitely has a very kind of, national brand recognition name as well. So it's definitely a great organization. And that was kind of my path that, during school, I just, cause kind of was really like tunnel vision focused, right, on academics and athletics. And, back when I was a little bit immature, I think I was a little bit more selfish as well. But it was something that, I definitely saw around campus, and it was something that, piqued my interest, and said, this is something I definitely think that I get a lot of reward for, and be able to be kind of, good at and lend my hand and lend, some of my perspective as well. So yeah, that was kind of my journey, and I've been involved in the organization ever since. I was a big brother, so technically, you kind of graduate once the little brother turns 18, but we still, keep in touch all the time, lives close to me. And then kind of halfway through the engagement, I joined the board of the Young Professionals Executive Committee as well for a couple of years, and then was the co-chair up until about 3 months ago. And that was just an organization that kind of promoted the organization and held events throughout the Boston area to engage, young professionals with becoming, a big brother or a big sister, and raising money for the organization.
Mm. Now, Peter, did you end up looking at other mentor organizations, or did you know, or did someone suggest to you Big Brother, Big Sister? Like, how did that become the one that you connected with?
Sure. Yeah, I obviously didn't explore any other. So I knew St. Mike's was with the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and I knew it had a big kind of national brand recognition name, even though I don't exactly know how the company works. There's a lot of different kind of silos of it. So that was, I'd reached out to them and kind of spoke with some people, and I was, super impressed right away. So really didn't even cross my mind to kind of explore, other areas. And I knew a couple of other of my friends as well were involved in the organization in the Boston area. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me, and it's a very kind of impressive organization as well. And I knew right away that I wanted to, if I was going to do anything in from a community service perspective, or was definitely mentoring. I think that's something that I thoroughly enjoy, right? I like working with kids and kind of being real with the kids as well, and saying, hey, this is just kind of follow doing the right things, and being supportive and being there for them. So yeah.
That's great. It's always interesting for me to hear stories like yours when, which also happens when alums call or email, that there wasn't necessarily a connection during their time at St. Mike's, and yet they found themselves embedded in the community in some really valuable ways, and made a sort of after the fact connection back to what St. Mike's brought them. So it is really interesting to me that I don't know, St. Mike's students find their way into the community and find like deep connection. And it's really powerful for me. Working in Move, I hear about it a lot, but your story is maybe a little less traditional from what I typically hear. And yet you're not the only one. It's somehow really cool that you as students and alums of St. Mike find your way into the
Absolutely. And it definitely kind of planted the seed in my head per se. I just remember sitting in the cafeteria, kids come, and some of my friends had little brothers, and I always thought that would be, something really cool when I had the time and, had a little bit more time to put the full effort into it. Right. So yeah. That was definitely important. So I definitely credit St. Mike's for, kind of introducing to me to that. So excellent.
Thank you, Peter. That's great. And Rachel, I saw your post that you were part of Big Brother, Big Sister when you were here at St. Mike's. So maybe, I know that's not the organization you're at right now, but might be a nice follow connection to Peter.
Yeah, and still in touch because of the connection with St. Mike's, and she's a sophomore at UVM now, which wow. I cannot believe. But for me, with my connection with the organization that I work for, Back on My Feet, similar to you, Laura, path was very winding and varied to get there. And before I worked with Back on My Feet, I worked with the U.S. Peace Corps in the Philippines while also getting a master's in international development and nonprofit management. And while I was working with the Peace Corps in the Philippines, I did mostly project management and community organizing around volunteer training, economic development, using sport for development, and strategic planning. And when I completed my time with the Peace Corps and got my master's, finished up my thesis, I loved my time and everything that I got to learn while I was over there, but knew that working in government wasn't for me. The bureaucracy, the structure, community organizing was where I thrived and where I could use a lot of that creativity and working and connecting with people. So while I was in the Philippines, running became a really important part of my life and how I connected with people. First, just running to get away from everyone. If anyone's ever been to Manila, one of the most densely populated cities in the world. And as I was running more and more, I was better off mentally, and I was also connecting better to my community by being visible and being a part of it. And I wanted to keep that a part of my life when I came back to the US. So I recommend this to everyone. Whatever you're passionate about and how you want to get involved, just Google it, because I can 99% guarantee that there's something that exists out there that meets what you're looking for if you search for it. So I Googled running in nonprofits, and back of my feet came up, and I could not believe that something like that existed, where I thought I would have to make it up. And it already did. And I was very fortunate that there was a job position that was volunteer management based in New York City, right after I finished my master's, and I applied, got that, lived for New York City, and advanced within the organization ever since.
Thank you, Rachel. That's fascinating. What I love about, I love a lot of your story. One piece that really struck me was how something that was personal to you and really benefited you at an important time in your life is part of what drove you to be where you are now. And it just reminds me that, like, we know ourselves best, and to be able to stop and be reflective and listen to what it is that we need and let that kind of guide us in some ways can be a really powerful tool among others in finding our place to be in the world. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to randomly go to Mike. Tell us how you got to where you are. This organization, I'm so curious about. I don't know anything about this.
Like blind dumb luck is probably the best, logical response of how I got here. So I didn't mention earlier, I was a business and finance major with a religious studies minor at St. Mike's. And so senior year, I was talking with my advisor, Karen Popovich, and literally was like, I just don't know what I want to do, right? Like, business major, pretty useful in a wide variety of ways, but I have no idea what I want to do after school. And I was at the time considering a couple of different internships, and I ended up doing an internship with a nonprofit that actually does capacity building training for other nonprofits. So basically what they're trying to do is help nonprofits, operate more sustainably and sort of use good business practice, right? Perfect combo of St. Mike's and business major. So I did that internship and realized that that's really what I wanted to do, but didn't know how to turn that into a real job, or what real job filled that role. And so I was talking with Professor Popovich, and she sort of was like, well, what about, a foundation? And you can, when they're giving money away, they're helping nonprofits not only with financial support, but often with capacity building and providing training and, guidance and assistance in different ways. And that just it just clicked. And so I spent, a few years in various different roles, primarily within fundraising for nonprofits. And then after I had a few years experience, I got a job as a fundraising consultant. So working for nonprofits, helping them raise money, but primarily, giving them advice and guidance on how to raise money. And then that led to this role at the Charitable Foundation, which we sort of operate, right? So 30,000 foot level, we are New Hampshire's community foundation, which means we're funded by people in New Hampshire, primarily to support nonprofits in New Hampshire. We do support organizations elsewhere, but about 80% of our dollars stay in the state of New Hampshire. And so, we're a grant-making organization that wants to financially support our local nonprofits and our community, but we also, sometimes we'll provide some level of guidance and technical assistance. And so it's just like a really great combination of all of those things. Yeah, but it get the first internship that I did happened to be, you know, sort of, I don't want to say blind luck, like I think I had an impressive resume, but that was just the organization that I came across, and I took that internship. And then from there, I've, you know, had a lot of fortunate networking connections that have led from one job to another as I've advanced.
It's such a, thank you for all of that. It's such a good reminder of all of the needs within a nonprofit organization. It's not only direct service that exists within nonprofits. And I think, at least from the place that I come from and the connection to community I've had in my life, I feel like that's what I know, and therefore that's what I expect. And so your story is such a great reminder that nonprofits need business managers, nonprofits need marketing people, nonprofits need, I don't know, the person who you know, finance people, who take care of paying everyone. I mean, there's all kinds of pieces. And some nonprofits are not direct service work, and yet they're doing really important pieces of the larger community connection. And so it's such a great reminder that you can be any major on campus and probably find some connection to a nonprofit.
Absolutely. That was actually something, like, there really isn't one specific nonprofit mission that resonates with me. Like, I love dogs, but I don't necessarily want to spend my career working for a dog rescue. Like, I am a terrible runner, but I enjoy going running, you know, for all of the same benefits Rachel mentioned. But like, the idea that both in consulting and at the foundation, my work spans so many different nonprofit missions really makes it, like, for me personally, that much more interesting.
That is really interesting. You actually make me so curious. I have a friend who, I don't know, is there an individual who owns a foundation, or does it depend on the structure of the foundation? So I know someone who has a foundation, whatever has means, and I've never really asked them what that means or what they do or how they connect to them, but now you've made me so curious.
Yeah, so foundations are still nonprofits, right? So just like a direct service organization, there isn't an owner to it. Once it's established, it becomes collectively owned by the community for the benefit of the community, right? So even like a community hospital, it doesn't have an owner, it's there for the whole community. So foundations are the same. Sometimes there can be, right, a family foundation or a private foundation, like the Gates Foundation. You know, the Gates family, once they put their money into the foundation, they don't, quote, own it. The foundation does, and the foundation sort of owns itself. But they have a lot more influence over it than if they put their money into the foundation I work for.
That is perfect. That is the exact clarification that helps me. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. And Joanne, oh, the organization that is so dear to my heart. I love the Sisters of Mercy and the work that they do. Tell us how you got where you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I've had a few more years at this than I think most of my fellow panelists. So I guess I just want to tell you that the place I'm at now makes sense in a way, in the context of where I've come from. And, you know, everything that all of you've said so far so resonates. It's anytime I've been in an alumni situation, it feels like it doesn't matter what our class years are. We have so much in common. Maybe that's just an Edmondite school. I don't know. I was a BA in business administration. You know, I worked for large corporations first in the hotel industry, like the Hyatt and the Sheraton. And then, you know, my heart just kept speaking to me about going deeper. And I knew I wanted to probably be a teacher. So that's what led me toward an MED and unplanned working in higher ed. And then people telling me, yeah, you're decent at alumni relations, you're decent at development, do that. And then earning more degrees, and then just being invited by all the lovely, you know, amazing young people around me, and suddenly being thinking about staying in Vermont and going on service trips and going on retreat weekends and just being around young people who thought they could change the world, and they're right, and they're smart and funny. So I moved back to Boston, where I originally came from, to work for Emmanuel College, and then I worked at something that taught me a lot, a state university, and realized, how hard it is for students to just pay $50,000 a year when actually they're only paying around half of that for a 4-year education each year, and most of them 5 years, because they have to take a year off to earn money. So I kept thinking that each time I made a change, I was closer to, like, I guess the common thread through everything I've done is education. But in the end, 3.5 years ago, I thought, I really need to stop traveling across the country and just, I don't know if you've ever been on a service trip, I'm going to say this. I need to be staying, at the end of the week or two, in India or New York City or wherever you are. You kind of delve deep, put your own ego aside, and then you have to go home, right? Back to a privileged life. And I thought, yeah, well, I love education. I love all the colleges I've worked with, but I need to stay at the end of the service trip and find a job that will allow me to stay with the people. And so the Sisters of Mercy were my first teachers, and they're religious sisters who believe that by educating, especially women and their children in the world, that they would bring up about 2/3 of all people in poverty in the world. So that's what they do. And they're educated, and they're educators. And their other area was healthcare. So when I'm in Burlington, Vermont, and when the sisters sold a local college that they owned in 2001, they put a little nest egg together to do a bunch of things, and they combined 3 program areas. One was a fully accredited entrepreneurship program that we still have at Mercy Connections. Another was a justice kind of and mentoring area where they were present inside the courts to offer programs to lift people who are justice involved. And then it was just called Education and Transition. And these are programs that offer ways to kind of become, if you choose, a little more resilient and form a community that's sort of a restorative, just community. So when I thought I should have more of a life balance about 3.5 years ago and kind of live and work in the same state for a while, after living in Vermont and traveling to New York every day and then around the country for about 9 years, I thought, I'm going to work there. And it's been really amazing, because I wouldn't have gone other than the fact that I needed to learn more. I might be a teacher, but I'm also a learner. And several of you have talked about, kind of in a way, excited about your work. Like, I need to go to a place where I'm not the smartest person in the room who knows the most. I need to have other people around me who can also lift me. So they said, well, do you want to work with incarcerated women? I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we could argue this, but maybe there's nobody more on the margins than incarcerated people in the country that incarcerates more people than like 10 countries at a time around the world. So of the 3 program areas, I work in the justice and mentoring area, and a big portion of my time is supporting justice-involved women as they leave incarceration at the only prison for women in Vermont, which is in South Burlington. And so what I do is I train volunteer women to become mentors for them. And then we go inside of the facility and meet women who are interested, and we orient them into the mentoring program. And we ask everybody to stay matched once we do the match for 12 months, which are really crucial, 12 months after release. So it's been an interesting thing during COVID. But what I've learned again and again, and especially in this job, I guess, in a special way, is it's right back to the service trips. It's right back to seeing myself in every other person, whether it's an incarcerated woman or not, and understanding that the only difference between us is that I was born into a family that allowed me to gain access to the social capital. And every single day, I think I pull on every single bit of education I got at St. Mike's, every bit of experience I ever had in alumni development, corporate, everything, to sort of try to balance that out as best I can. So that's Mercy Connections is very small. It's 19 years old. There's 12 of us on staff. We're underfunded, and we do really amazing work in a way when you think about the resources we have. We're under $1 million budget. It can resonate. If we're a nonprofit, we're generally in there not for the fame or the glory or even the salary, but it's a really amazing place to be, and I'd love to bring you all there anytime after the pandemic to sort of visit it. You'd all be welcome.
Thank you, Joanne. Mercy Connection, well, the Sisters of Mercy in general, Mercy Connection is an organization, and there are many, so many organizations, and I don't know them all, but it is one organization that lives out its mission, but its values, what it believes in, who it is in everything you do. And it's just a beautiful thing to witness and be part of in the times that I've been able to. So I love what you've said. The heart part of your story is really beautiful. And if you all remember, Move from your time here, Head, Heart, and Hands is kind of where we're at. So it's really nice to see to hear your heart be at the center for this one.
Yeah, I have to also just add that I was a big sister for 4 years when I was an undergrad in the 80s. So, St. Mike's has a real amazing history that kind of unfolds right when we all walk on campus. And I drove by tonight and all the holiday trees are all lit up. And at the same time as I was going by thinking of some of my former students there, the phone rings and, somebody from the class of 09. And it just, we're pretty fortunate, aren't we, to be part of this community?
It's pretty neat. It is. Before we shift to talk a little bit about what's happening right now with your organizations, if anyone watching is resonating with things you're saying, is there a way that they could connect with your organization? Do you know of openings right now? Is the website the best place? How might they connect? Let's see, Mike, maybe I'll start with you. You're near my top left corner here.
Yeah, of course. So first off, I would say if you want to learn more in, at greater depth than we can go tonight, I'd love to connect. Happy to chat. I'm sure St. Mike's can share my contact info. We don't presently have any openings, but New Hampshire Charitable Foundation is just, one community foundation. There are actually about 750 to 800 different community foundations around the country. The Boston Foundation, New York Community Trust. In Indiana, every single county has their own community foundation. So there's 92 of them or something like that. So Council on Foundations is like an industry association. I think their website is cof.org, and they have a job board. So we don't in New Hampshire have openings. If you're interested in community foundation, as a field, COF would be a great resource.
Great, thank you, Mike. And I see that Rachel posted in the chat where you can connect with her if you are interested in her organization.
And we also are hiring. So if you go to backonmyfeet.org and to the career pages, we do have some listings posted, and as well as volunteer opportunities.
That's awesome and exciting to know there are positions right now.
Yeah,
that is great.
Me too.
Joanne also posted in the chat the website for Mercy Connections as a good place to go. Peter, any thoughts about Big Brother, Big Sister if folks want to connect?
Absolutely. I'll send my email address over real quick right now as well. Happy to kind of connect with any, talk about it. I believe there's a couple of open positions as well. But for anyone that, doesn't want a full-time position and wants to just kind of do it on a volunteer basis, similar to myself as well. I mean, there's just, an extraordinarily amount of opportunities and different types of engagements and different types of levels of engagement, right? In terms of like frequency and all that type of stuff. So, I'm sure as many of your organizations will take as many, volunteers and as much else as much help as possible, and in whatever capacity you'd be willing to kind of, help out on. So absolutely.
Great. Thank you all. And I'll just point you all to the chat. Mike posted something else there for more information. You're welcome to check there. Okay, so I'm going to shift. Here comes the COVID question. Watch out, everybody. As we all know, the past 8 months, I keep saying that the past 8 months have been something. You can define something however you would like. And I think, Mike, when we first logged on, you were talking about gratitude, and I have found challenge and trickiness and exhaustion in the last few months. And I appreciated you saying that. I have also found so much space for gratitude, some really special moments, particularly with my children. So there's been a lot of both and in that time, we all have been asked to do and be so much, which can be challenging, but also can open up some new doors or opportunities. And so I'm curious, in your organizations, what is the impact of COVID been? What do things look like right now? What has had to change because of COVID, if anything?
Nearly everything. Happy to start. Of course, well, with my work at Back on My Feet, and what we do at Back on My Feet is work with men and women who are currently in transitional shelters and or residential treatment facilities for addiction recovery. And our bread and butter as an organization is creating community and in-person connection through our runs and our workforce development programming. So as soon as we could not do in person anymore, and we're in 14 different cities across the US, and had to respond very quickly and, dare I say, pivot to virtual again. And we had to pivot to virtual and had to be very agile, very creative right away, and realizing we can still create community, we can still connect, even if what we thought was our only thing, it doesn't have to be our only thing. And kind of getting over that, if not this, there's no way kind of thinking, and having to be very creative problem solvers in that. And one of the greater challenges is the digital divide within the homeless community, or people who are in residential shelter type situations, where many of the shelters do not have Wi-Fi, or many of our members, all of our typical, you'd say a client is a member of Back on My Feet, because we're all members of a team. Our members are in residential treatment facilities, may not be allowed to have cell phones during certain phases of their treatment program, so that they can focus on their recovery at this time. So the creativity of getting in touch with people turned into a really great opportunity to apply for grants on technology, since that was a high priority in a lot of funding organizations or within the government. And using that to start to bridge some of that digital divide, to work on tech literacy, tech training, that not only will help our interactions with our members and bringing community in, because everyone was so desperate to connect, our volunteers, our members. Once we were able to start training up, we found that our members have become much more resilient in their job application processes and maintaining their careers. For example, in Philadelphia, about 25 of our members in our alumni community lost employment because they were in vulnerable jobs that were face-to-face or service industry. But happy to say by the end of September, 100% of them have regained employment because we were able to use the skills and resources of that really strong bread and butter community virtually.
That is such an interesting thing to, when you know in person and you do it well, to then think, what else, like, what more are we? How do we do that?
There's an
I can connect
identity
with that from a,
crisis.
yeah.
Mhm.
I can really connect with that from a move perspective and the shifts that we needed to make, not being able to be in, but there were still community needs, some of them different, some of them the same, but there were still needs. And we were still able to meet them. We just had to figure out how to do them in a different way. So I can connect with that in the work that I'm doing too. Yeah. Thank you, Rachel.
We found that we kind of looking for the silver linings anywhere, right? But we found that in this virtual world, we are going to maintain a lot of our virtual programming, even if when we've returned to in-person programming in some areas, but still maintain a large amount of that virtual programming. So for example, some of the questions coming up or that you have is, how can I get involved? And not being a global organization, being able to offer virtual volunteer opportunities where someone who is a member in Atlanta is able to connect with a volunteer in Baltimore on something that is a training opportunity specific for them, whereas we might not have thought of that as our first option before. One who wants to attend a training with Salesforce putting on for workforce development in San Francisco can attend if they are in Boston. So it's opened up to Joanne's comments before, are the social capital of our members, where they're able to connect to more people beyond the scope of in-person programming.
Yeah, that reach, that shift in reach, or that extension in reach has been really amazing to watch kind of across the board. I'd be curious if anyone else, and whoever wants to go next, if anyone else, if that's been a piece of your puzzle at your organization with COVID as an overlay. And Joanne, go ahead. I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, I kind of missed what you said. You asked what has been part of an overlay. I kind of missed what you asked.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, with COVID happening, what changes have had to happen at your organization? And I'm just trying to make a connection. Rachel was saying about one of the positives of having to shift so dramatically is that the reach of the organization has extended so much further than what it was originally. And I was just curious if others have felt that same thing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, okay, so the research tells us in mentoring adult women who are being released, right, re-entering community, the research around that for trauma affected and very gender responsive research points to two very specific areas. That your mentor becomes someone with whom you can establish a new healthy relationship, one that's very positive and pro-social, so to speak, right? And that's generally done in meetings, face to face. It really resonates with Rachel said, because most of the people in prison in this country don't have money for an iPhone and a laptop. And generally, they're looking for housing and ways to stay away from substance misuse. And their parole officer looking at an infraction in their furlough, that's enough to send them back to jail. So that being said, the research also points to mentoring as offering someone in reentry an opportunity to establish new ways, new healthy ways to spend leisure time. So a mentor is someone to talk things over with, right? Very similar to what we do that Mike was talking about too, is this, the adult child mentor relationship as well, but two adults, a little bit different. Anyway, so enter a pandemic, right? And you can't do either of those things in person. And you can't reach people in reentry who are very hastily released across the country, but in Vermont, very hastily released unless they were in for very serious, vicious felonies to mitigate the spread of COVID inside the facilities. So suddenly, if I'm trying to find them, right, and it's confidential information, and they're all over Vermont, They're not in the Burlington area. They're not up north where we've already been matching women for many years. So all of that, and knowing that most of the women we serve are living right around the poverty economic line. And in a pandemic, not just the stigma of being justice involved gets in your way. There aren't any jobs open, right? So if you want to get custody of your children, it becomes more and more complicated. I keep thinking of what Father Mike Cronig used to always say. He would say to me when I worked with at St. Michael's, he would say, Joe, if you want to look at any social problem, it only will take you 30 minutes to trace it back to systemic poverty. And that's exactly right. So all of that being said, we knew we had to just dig in. And so we got on the phone and we emailed where we could. And we did a lot of like old fashioned, like walking into some of the centers in Burlington and seeing what we could find. And we ended up connecting with some of the women in ways we've never connected before. We've ended up remotely matching women all over Vermont and figuring that, and going online with our mentor training, and going online with our mentor support groups, and going online with what we could, and getting some federal money to buy some laptops and some track phones, and starting a couple of COVID safe programs that enabled our participants to come right out front of our little humble office on South Champlain Street. One is cleverly called Curbside Connected. Can't take full credit for the name, but and so literally we pre-pack a bag of fresh food and some essentials like a mask, sanitizer, feminine hygiene, and people come up to the window, and they're 6 feet apart. There's a table between them and me. The window's open. We all have our masks and our gloves, which is funny, isn't it? And they can pick that up, but it has become an isolation buster. So we've done probably what all of you've done. We've done a combination of adapting with a little technology, but sort of the old-fashioned stuff. I mean, when was the last time you really kind of stopped texting and picked up the phone and tried to have real conversations because you knew you wouldn't be able to see someone's face for a long time, and you knew you had to go deeper than a text? So yeah, I think I keep saying this to everybody that I work with, and they're like, Joe, if you say that again, silver lining, because some days it's very sad and very, very frustrating and very, even me, emotionally hard. But I keep thinking we're gonna get through, and there's a bunch of silver linings, and I'm very, very sure that Mercy Connections, little that we are, will emerge stronger after the pandemic. And I think we're going to keep doing some of the things we're doing now that we've been forced to do, like using, technology a little more.
Some beautiful little gifts have found their way because of COVID, which is really, really nice. Peter, you helped me earlier over the summer sort of figure out some nuts and bolts of how our mentor programming was going to work with COVID. So I'm curious what's been happening for you all or for Big Brother, Big Sister with COVID. And then Mike, I want to make sure to get to you. I know that we're sort of coming up on our time here, but I want to hear what's happening at the foundation too. But Peter, what does the mentoring look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, similar to what Joanne and Rachel had mentioned, right? I mean, just a full-on kind of pivot had to be made, right? So everything had to come, kind of the bread and butter of the organization is, right, in-person mentoring and one-on-one relationships and, doing activities and getting out and about. But, obviously that just, was no longer possible. So everything had to be, pivoted pretty quickly to virtual type of engagements. Now, I will say that the organization is definitely pretty fortunate. I'd like to think that. So the Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Eastern Mass has a pretty good amount of resources and financial resources as well. So I think that we've definitely benefited from some of those resources. But a little bit more uniquely from my perspective, right? So I was the chair of the Young Professionals Group, and on a yearly basis, our big kind of one of our, we have events throughout the year, but our preeminent event is what we call Casino Night, and it happens every April. And it's close to about 800 people in the Boston area, and we raised close to $200,000 in the night. So that was a struggle, to say the least, right? So we had it planned, and we had all of our money at the Artists for Humanity in South Boston. So we had to pivot pretty quickly on that. We ended up kind of pushing it to September, and then obviously had to completely kind of scrap the event. So what we ended up doing was putting on kind of a little bit more unique and creative virtual event, right? Where kind of honored the tickets, and we had a bunch of guest speakers through the Boston area and some famous athletes to come on. And so it was actually a really successful event. Now, it wasn't obviously as fun as, being able to have some drinks with a lot of people, and, being with, a ton of people in the Young Professionals, environment in Boston at a really cool event, and, being able to engage with everyone. But it really took time for people to really focus on the organization and the mission, right? So a lot of times, and at the actual event, people kind of forget what they're there about. Where kind of the virtual event was, really all about the organization and what was going on, and really kind of engaging and how you can get involved, right? In all the different kind of, capacities. Hey, do I want to be a full-time big brother or big sister, or do I want to maybe do more of a hybrid environment? So it was interesting. It was definitely a struggle, and definitely missed the big event, but hopefully, we'll be able to, come out of this at some point in time, and definitely kind of use that, virtual event for something down the line as well. So I don't think that would, that's going to be a one-time event. I think that we, learned a lot from it, and, we're able to do something, and, a little bit more of a nimble type of event as well. And it was successful, from a fundraising perspective, where sometimes people get to these, brick and mortar events and they kind of forget what they're there about, where, the virtual event was, we really focused on the organization, and we heard from some little brothers and some big brothers, and it ended up being fantastic. So, yeah.
What a great shift in a moment when you just really needed to, and still needed to fundraise. That's incredible. That's great. And Mike, I'm curious, because your work is a little bit different from the other three panels. So what did COVID look like in terms of needed changes for you all?
Yeah, it's interesting. At its core, you could say that nothing changed, right? Our day-to-day is getting money out the door to nonprofits who are doing great work. Through COVID, the needs of those nonprofits, as my three fellow panelists have just shared, have just been so dramatic, right? Everything from an event being canceled, which has a real revenue bottom line impact to an organization, to having to procure cell phones and laptops to reach your clients or your members. All of these things kind of come together, right? Anytime there's a crisis, especially one that involves the financial market in any way, nonprofits tend to suffer from decreased revenue, while at this exact same moment, the demands and the need for their service is increasing, right? That at its core, that is what nonprofits do in our community. Like, they are that safety net. In this pandemic, with both health implications, economic and financial challenges, unemployment, all of these things coming together, that's exactly what it was, of huge demands on nonprofits, and at the same time, huge challenges to their budgets and their revenue. So for us, at its core, nothing changed. We just tried to do everything we could to get money out quicker and more flexibly, and more generously, and really to focus in on the organizations that are serving vulnerable populations. But at the same time, right, every arts organization that's critical to our community's vibrancy has been closed, and they're dependent on ticket revenue. Environmental organizations have seen huge increases in the number of people using their trails, because we're all at home, so let's get outside. So just across the board, the need has been enormous. And we've really just tried to streamline our grant processes, get money out the door quicker, lower the barriers to entry in terms of not wanting nonprofits to have to write a 20-page application if we can get what we need in two. So a lot of those, I hope, and sort of we collectively hope those changes that almost make the foundation more like user-friendly, more accessible to nonprofits. We hope they'll continue. But yeah, at its core, just trying to support the organizations that are doing good work on the front lines.
Thank you. What a, I guess, powerful experience to be in a position to meet the significantly changed needs of agencies and organizations. That's obviously important and maybe feels really good. Maybe, I'm sure your work always feels good, but in a moment of I mean, without being dramatic, in a moment of crisis, being able to say yes is a really important and powerful. That's pretty neat. So we're closing out in a few minutes. I have two last questions, but I'm going to ask you to decide which one you want to respond to, and we'll do one last round. So here they are. How could a person support a local organization even if they cannot physically work with them at this time because of COVID? So what are other ways to support organizations if you can't be sort of in person meeting the need? The other question is, what advice would you give someone who's passionate about a social issue but isn't sure how to get involved? So advice or how to support outside of direct service. You choose your own adventure. Mike, do you just went last? Do you want to start with? Oh, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, sorry. I can jump in around how can I support an organization that you can't physically work for. So a lot of organizations have all sorts of different kind of engagement levels, right? So like, that was one of the big things that I had reservations. I was like, I don't know how much time I have. And that's kind of the biggest thing when you're not working full time for the organization. So really just kind of, engaging as much as possible, right? Like sometimes there'll be, just our webinars, once a month, I know for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and just kind of an FAQ and an interactive session. So even anything, upon, something like that. I know that our organization also has kind of more quarterly events where it's more kind of group virtual sessions as well. So all sorts of different kind of, levels of engagement. So that would be, I guess, my advice on that piece. Just kind of dive into it and whatever works for you, because all these organizations are looking for as many resources and people that, even want to just kind of listen to their story, right? And kind of listen to what they're all about and understanding their mission and who they're helping and how they fundraise, and that would be definitely my advice.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone on how to get involved? Other ways to be involved?
If you can make a financial gift in any amount, it's incredible. Just even the number of gifts an organization gets sometimes opens doors to further grants and funding. And I think just I liked what Pete said too, in a way. I think just a small amount and believing that just a small involvement, a webinar, or maybe showing up for one event to see if you can help, that sort of thing. Believing that has an impact, I think is important. I would encourage people to believe in that very much.
That's great. Thank you, Joanne. Mike, thoughts?
Well, I was gonna pick the advice to someone who's passionate about a social issue. I'd say pick up the phone. I actually am at the Charitable Foundation in the role I'm in because I was curious about how foundations work, Laura, much like yourself earlier. And I reached out and connected with the director of grant making for basically a 15-minute informational phone call, saying like, I currently work in a nonprofit, but I want to learn more about you. And 6 months later, the organization had a job opening. I saw that and I went, wow, I was really impressed by what I learned in that interview. And that led me here. So I've never met somebody who works in a nonprofit who isn't passionate about talking about what they do. and giving advice and wanting to help somebody else get involved with that. And, you know, it could take all forms, but I think if you reach out, just pick up the phone and say, I want to learn more, they're going to tell you more, and they're probably going to try and get you in and get you involved.
Great advice. And Rachel, which are you choosing?
Yeah, I build upon what Mike shared. If you know your social issue, it gets you going, what you're really passionate about, but you're not sure what's out there or what you can bring to the table, so that it's not something that's performative, but you're really having impact in something. Two pieces that I like to share on how to get involved, in addition to what everyone else has shared, is if there isn't something, say for example, there isn't anything going on in an organization that you really want to get involved with, do the background research, whether it's work or volunteering with them. Go on LinkedIn to see who works for the company and what was their pathway. So we all shared our pathways to how we got there, and had a lot of different stops along the way. And maybe there is something along the pathway that you can find on LinkedIn, employee of that nonprofit or organization or foundation that resonates with you, that you could say, oh, I would go to school for that, so I could get to that position, or I would be in that organization so that I could then eventually be here. Very rarely is it linear. So I would learn more from people's stories. And the piece that I share that hasn't come as much up on the panel is, I know I had this misconception, so that's why I like to say it, is that you don't have to be involved with a nonprofit to do the most good in something. That, I mean, be involved with Back on My Feet, please, email me. But you can also be working for a for-profit company and still have a large amount of impact in whatever social cause that you're passionate about. So I work very closely with our corporate partners on their social impact. So I've gotten the opportunity to work with Accenture's HR department on more inclusive hiring for people from varied education backgrounds, or getting to work with Bombas Socks on their charitable giving program and how they provide socks to the community, and what's important. So it can show up in a lot of different ways. So find whatever that is that you're passionate about, and do the research, see what's going on.
Great suggestions, Rachel. Thank you all so much. I feel like, I mean, it's 8:04. Very genuinely, I feel like I could talk to you all for another like hour or two. It's just so interesting what you do, how you've gotten there, what you care about, how you live out what you care about, suggestions and advice that you have for those watching. It's really amazing. Thank you for the work that you do. And I really, really appreciate you being here with us tonight. Emily or Jacob or Angie, I don't know if there's anything you need to offer before we close out. So I'll give it a second to see if you pop back on the screen. But I think I'm definitely seeing thank yous from folks who are watching, who we can't see right now, but thank you for putting your information in the chat. I'm sure that Emily or Jacob will make sure that folks have that if they want it, if they didn't take it from the chat. And I guess I just really appreciate you doing the work that you do and being willing to share it with the Mike's community. I'm just going to check my chat.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Nice
thank
to
you very
see
much,
everyone.
everyone. That
Thank
was
you
excellent.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Laura, for having us. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you're
everyone.
welcome. It's
Nice
great to
connecting
see
with
you all.
everyone.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.